This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two lost moviegoers after seeing Kraven the Hunter. This week, I am joined by Brian Murray.
Hello.
And the one and only Kate Skocelas.
Hey.
Thank you both for joining me this week. This is a very exciting episode because it is one of the, I want to say, new classics of IRCB, in that where we sit down and we talk to one of our panelist members about who they are outside of reading comic books. You listen to us talk about comic books every single week. Now it's time to get to know these people. We've been doing this for a while now, and today we are reaching into the deep archives of IRCB. Now we're in the sub 100 episodes for talking to people, and today is Kate Skocelas' panelist episode. Kate, I'm super excited to talk to you about everything that's happened since 2016 when you first joined the show. But before we get into that, let's talk about comic books. So I have these two legally mandated questions that I have, and that's how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Kate.
I have been okay. It has been crazy last 2 months, crunch time towards finishing my comprehensive exam for my PhD. So finally finished that, passed that, all done, which is a big relief. And on Christmas break now, huzzah.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So have gotten back into reading that I had, that you get into that period where you're reading so much for work that you completely stop reading for pleasure. That's where I was at for months,
Sure.
reading tons and tons of papers for the lit review section. So I now have a stack of comics from the library that I've been making my way through while eating party mix that my family home makes for the holidays, just mainlining it into my blood vessels and
right. Hibernation mode and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Have stuff to talk about here. So one of the first books I picked up from the library when I went to jumpstart my comics here is Briar Volume 1, which is a comic from Boom, but it's on Comixology Unlimited as well. And I grabbed it because the cover is very pretty, if we're being completely honest. That is the sole reason. And it turns out it's really pretty because the colors are by Mateus Lopez, who did the colors on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. He can make everything beautiful. This is written by Christopher Cantwell and illustrated by Germaine Garcia. I will say that the colors are gorgeous. The art is good. The writing leaves a lot to be desired, which is weird because Christopher Cantwell did Halt and Catch Fire and some other good stuff. But this one was just a swing and a miss for me writing-wise. So it's a dark retelling of Sleeping Beauty. The premise is that when the prince came to wake her up, he was like, wait a minute, what if I just marry her but don't wake her up? Because that'd make her a much easier wife to deal with. And so he does that.
Oh.
And so yeah. And then, so she doesn't wake up for another 100 years or whatever. And when she does finally wake up, the world has essentially fallen into a dystopia. So her whole kingdom is long since gone and forgotten. There's ruins of her former kingdom, and she has to kind of go out into the world and figure out what's going on and how to live in this new, very hostile world.
Sure.
Which is a semi-cool premise to me. I don't know. I was very sick for a year and a half, so I tackled some big series, including Fable, and I've read 20 plus volumes of Fable not that long ago. So coming into another fairy tale retelling kind of thing, I was like, this doesn't live up to Fable, which is the new bar.
Sure.
And I'm also just pretty burnt out on that whole retelling premise of fairy tales. But the thing that really got me for the writing is it felt very much like there was an original script and someone was like, you need to make this feel more adult. Otherwise this reads like a children's book. And they're like, I know what we'll do. We'll take someone who doesn't know how to swear in English and we'll have them add a bunch of swear words so that people can tell this is for adults. But it's the most haphazard, weird use of fuck all over the place. And just it reads so weird.
That's what drinking with Mike is like too.
Hey.
Yeah. So I'll say this is a 4-issue volume 1, and I didn't actually finish the last issue. Like that's the level of like it just gets like tedious to read that type of thing. I did look through the rest of the pages for the art because the art is beautiful, particularly colors. But I think what this ultimately inspired me to do was to go pick up other books by Matheus Lopes on colors.
Okay.
Maybe we just reread Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Like, maybe we just stick to what we know and love.
Exactly. Danny was saying, you should have been on this episode that we did last week about picking a book for the covers, because this sounds exactly like that, right? Where you pick it up whether you like it or not, just for how beautiful the cover looks. Because I just looked at the preview, and boy, oh boy, that is a cool looking comic book cover. I could 100% see myself going, I just need to check out what this is, because you've sold me on whatever business is going on the cover. But it's unfortunate to hear that didn't hit the bar, I guess, or didn't hit, I guess, your bar for expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it's from the library too, so like that threshold for like picking up by cover for me is so low.
Sure.
So, because I just go in, grab a stack.
Gotcha. That sounds like exactly what Kate Lamphere does as well. So,
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we are library buddies in that regard.
Yeah, very cool. Well, hopefully the next Matheus Lopes books that you pick up is beautiful and wonderful, even if it is just another Supergirl book that you've already read before. So, yeah, Brian, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
I've been pretty good. It's mostly been a video games kind of period for me. I've been playing that Metaphor Refantasio, whatever, I don't know how you say it.
Oh yeah, it won a bunch of awards. It won a bunch of awards at the Game Awards, right?
Yeah, RPG of the Year.
Yeah.
It's good. It's weird, but in a way that I really enjoy.
Cool.
I did manage to sit down and do a little bit of comic book reading. And this read, brought to you by TikTok, is Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, Judgment Day.
Yes. Yes.
It's written by Kieran Gillen, featuring too many artists to list. The basic premise is that Droog, who you might recall from the movie as being a kind of a prick, is in charge of the Eternals, and he's decided on a very strict reading of the Eternals Bible that says that their mission to exterminate all deviants includes X-Men. They are too deviant to live, so they naturally go to war, and the Avengers come down on the right side of this conflict for once. But they do it in the most stupid way possible, by going, let's reanimate a dead god. That can only go well.
Yeah, obviously.
So they reanimate the Celestial that they've been living in, because that was also a thing. The Avengers just lived inside of a dead Celestial for a while.
Yeah.
Nothing weird about that.
No, totally normal stuff.
Yeah.
So they reanimate it, and it promptly goes, okay, cool, I'm going to judge every living person on this planet in 24 hours. And if not enough of you pass the vibe check, I'm going to kill you all.
Yeah. I love that premise. Like, it's such a stupid thing, but also if you're dealing with Celestials, something celestially large should happen, right?
Yeah.
Such a funny idea.
There are some really great judgments in there. The Celestial goes to Doom and tells him that he can pass judgment if he just says that Reed Richards is smarter than him. And he just says, Doom laughs and judges himself worthy. I concur. The really good one was Charles Xavier fails because he's such a bad dad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
The Celestial calls him up as his son, is like, hey, can we talk? And he's like, no, I'm busy. It's like, could you just talk to your kid and maybe save the world in the process?
No. Professor X is too big for that.
He does send children into battle a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly, Kate.
And I feel like having child soldiers, not in the good column.
Yeah.
Definitely missed out on that watching the 90s cartoon. I didn't pick up on that. I thought X was a great guy, but
yeah.
Turns out he is going to give it to you.
All right, Brian. I'll kick you off this goddamn show.
I'll see you later. I have to get out before my panelist episode.
Right. But what did you think? Did you enjoy this? I really, really love this, but of course I'm like biased towards all things X-Men in some ways. So I'm curious to know someone who's a little bit on the outside of that. What you thought or what you
Yeah,
think?
I thought it was pretty good. It holds up as a standalone a lot better than I expected it to. Like, I'm used to going into these big Marvel events and just kind of accepting that I'm not going to know what the fuck is going on. But this one I think did a better job than a lot of other ones have of like establishing who the important players in this book are. And if it doesn't give you an idea of like who they are and what they do, they're probably not like you don't have to know. Like,
Sure.
I mean, it's Kieran Gillen writing, so very funny. Serious when it needs to be, but funny when it can be.
I'm curious though, now that you've read this Judgment Day, which is kind of the end story for the Eternals that Kieran Gillen was writing, do you have any interest to go back and like read the Eternals storyline that kind of like precedes this build up? Because I think it's a really good run. Like, I really don't like the Eternals, and we're going to get into a little bit of discussion of my thoughts of Jack Kirby's crazy space creations in a little bit, but yeah, I actually really enjoyed this run on the Eternals, so I'm curious to know if you were interested enough in the Eternals piece of this story to maybe go back and read that, because it's also Kieran Gillen on writing, like I said.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. It definitely, like, on its own wasn't enough, but between enjoying this book and your recommendation, maybe I'll go check it out.
Yeah, I think it is pretty good overall, but yeah, that the whole bit with Druig as like being in charge of the Immortals and like you said, holding the Druid the Eternals Bible like very close to his heart and stuff is a thing that I thought was annoying at first, but the payoff in Judgment Day is awesome. Like, as you see, that the event is really, really fun. So yeah, I think you'll dig it. If you like Judgment Day, I think you'll like that Eternals run too.
The only thing that I don't like about it is that it does the very classic comics thing of like doing a bunch of really big stuff and then having a status quo reset at the end.
Oh yeah. But I mean, you're reading a Marvel comic, Brian.
Yeah. I mean, I don't expect it. Like, I didn't go into this expecting world changing ramifications or anything like that. So would have been cool though.
Yeah, exactly. It is very cool, and that is maybe what we're hoping to get out of a lot of these event books. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that you dug it. I personally usually don't dig in on these events either, but like, one, it was crossing over the Krakoa era, and two, I needed to see the conclusion of that Eternals line, and I like, this is one of the rare actual events that I bought the collection of. Like, usually I'll just read this stuff and just say whatever, I read it, but I really enjoyed this. So yeah, glad to hear that you enjoyed it. I'm going to stop talking about how much I liked it too. So yeah, let me talk about a book that that I read recently. I have also been in the same boat as Brian, where I've just been playing video games nonstop, but I did sit down and read a bunch of comics. I've been mixing my time between a Baldur's Gate 3, which I have a current restarted run that I'm like, I'm actually going to finish it this time instead of getting mad about not being able to romance the character that I want to romance. And I got a copy of this game called oh man, it's a blackjack game that's very similar to Balatro, which I know, Brian, I'm starting to ring some bells in your head, and I'm sorry about this in advance. But it's very cool in the sense that like let me find the name of it because I can't think of. It's called Dungeons and Degenerate Gamblers. That's what it's called.
Oh, I hated that game.
Oh, you hated that game? Okay. Phew. I didn't want to take any more of your time after I talked to you about Balatro.
No, I got Balatro on my computer and on my phone. I don't escape it.
Right. I'm the exact same way. Well, I've been playing a lot of that because for some reason I don't like this Dungeon and Degenerate Gamblers the way that it does its entire story and the way that it does all of its like mechanics. But at the same time, I can't stop playing it because I love blackjack. I can't ever go into a casino. I think I've realized I just can't, because if I do, I'll lose all my money in blackjack. But yeah, so I enjoy it for that. In that regard, I feel like the mechanics are like way too overly complicated and not well explained. So I'm constantly losing for reasons that I don't understand. But
yeah, I think that it's just because I played Balatro and Balatro is so good that when I tried this and it wasn't like up to that standard of, I don't know, niche roguelike gambling game. Kind of a micro genre.
Yeah. No, I totally feel that. But yeah, trying to split my time between the two, or I guess between Balatro and Baldur's Gate. I have been playing that game, but yeah, I'll talk more about Baldur's Gate if anyone's interested after the show. But I did read a comic book. I did sit down and read quite a few comics, mostly stuff that I was behind on. So I got caught up on Chainsaw Man and One Piece and a couple other books that I don't have to talk about now. But I did finally sit down to read Tin Can Society number 1 through 3. This is a comic book that had a lot of chatter on the IRCB Discord, and I never checked into it because I'm always hesitant on Rick Remender books, even though I always like them at the start. It's such a frustrating thing. But this book is only story by Rick Remender and a guy named Peter Warren. Peter Warren did the writing for the book, art by Francesco Mobley, colors by Chuck Ree, and letters by Jackie Marzin. This is basically a super vigilante murder mystery whodunit in a world where superheroes aren't really a thing. There's just like a guy who has a superpowered suit. And so the summary that I would give is a guy named Johnny Moore used to be the super vigilante known as Caliburn until someone killed him. His estranged childhood friends decide they're the only 4 people who can solve what happened to him because they know him best. And sure, Johnny made enemies busting criminals over the years, but who would want to kill this beacon of hope for people with physical disabilities? Why are his friends so suddenly determined to figure this out? Like, I didn't really know what this book was going to be about when I first jumped into it. There'd been a lot of chatter, like I said, so I was like, I'm going to give this a try. I've got number 1 through 3. Let's take a look. And this book, for those who are maybe remotely interested at this point, I want to say the book does come with a big fat disclaimer in the first issue that there is like about violence, and specifically violence towards people of color with physical disabilities, because our main character, this guy Caliburn who died, has spina bifida, and he very clearly gets killed in the first couple of pages. That's not really a spoiler. And the story is kind of about the violence itself, so you can't really escape it after that first issue. But overall, I feel like the writing and like how everything has been portrayed in the story has been very respectful to the characters in this book, especially around Johnny and him having spina bifida. And but yeah, for a 9-issue series, this is like a 9-issue miniseries. I feel like there's a lot packed into each issue, but not in a bad way, right? Like some miniseries can be like really overpacked and over wordy to try to just make sure that you get everything that's going down. But I feel like this book manages to do that, but with the reason of like trying to establish all of the characters, and you never feel overwhelmed like every page is too packed with words. And I think that by making this a 9-issue series, it gives the creative team a lot of time to not only develop the story we're following, but each of the characters, as well as each of their potential motives and all the people and players that may be coming involved. And they do this thing in this story, which is a classic Image thing. I feel like it's a classic Saga moment or Walking Dead moment, where each issue ends with this massive cliffhanger that you are almost mad about, but it happens in such a way that you could never predict the ending of it. And I love that, right? Like, that is what a good cliffhanger is. That is what, like, in some ways, good comic book writing is, especially when you're talking about indie books, or especially when you're talking about Image books. So I appreciated it, but there are so many moments throughout each of the first 3 issues where they could have ended the book that you think, oh, this is the cliffhanger. Oh, crap, I've got 4 more pages left. What's actually going to be the cliffhanger this issue? So I like that they're keeping me on my toes as a reader, because you can never tell if something's going to be a character reveal or an action reveal or a flashback or some sudden thing that you couldn't have seen coming out of left field. And so I appreciate all of that. And overall, this book looks really good. I mean, Francesco Mobley's art is incredible. Like, it's a very beautiful book that they've clearly taken a lot of time on to make it look super good, because each of the characters in this book that we followed so far have been very distinct. And you get this idea of what the Tin Can Society is. They do a lot to basically like grow these people from flashback children into adults, and you can see that natural progression, which I think is a very interesting thing, because I feel like with some artists, they don't have I don't know how to make this adult into a smaller size person, but I feel like Mobley does a really, really good job in this book with that. So I'm liking it so far. We're only 3 issues in out of 9, so we'll see. But I guess I finished Act 1, maybe, if you want to break it up like that. But we'll see. I'm digging it. I'm going to probably keep reading it. So if you're interested in like a new, not quite superhero murder mystery, Tin Can Society, I think is it. It's pretty solid.
Yeah, sounds cool. You can definitely see a different world where they like tried to force it in 8 issues instead of 9.
Sure.
And it totally like collapsed the way you were saying, like things getting too tightly packed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's cool that they gave them the breathing room they needed to tell the story correctly.
absolutely. And then, it's good to know that this isn't an ongoing too. It's nice to have like a maxi series like this. I think there's something nice about getting a big chunky comic that at the end is probably going to be, hopefully will be a very good story from start to finish. So this is the thing though, where we're at the end of issue 3 almost feels like they've half solved the mystery. So I'm really wondering like where these next 6 issues are going to go. And that makes me even more excited to keep reading because you've got a lot of runway and I have no idea what this story could entail. And to me, that makes a really good comic book. So yeah, very excited for more of Tin Can Society. And I hope other people check this book out. I'd love to hear what other people think about this. I know there was a lot of hype, like I said before. So yeah, but let's move on. Let's talk about comic books that are on the top of your pile, comics that are new or old, or just something you're trying to get off your bookshelf. I want to shout out some of the folks hanging out with us on Discord today who have some books that they're going to be reading. Paul G is going to be reading Death Transit Tanager and Old Dog Operations. I don't know what this is, Paul, so you have to link me to it. I probably butchered all of that. Hugh's going to be reading The Horizon Experiment Motherfucking Monsters #1. Cool. And Danny's going to be reading New Gods #1, which, spoilers, may be a pick for someone else here on today's episode. So, Kate, let's start with you. What is on the top of your pile this week?
So it's quite literally on the top of my pile, sitting on my bookshelf here from the library. It's called Stars in Their Eyes. It's a YA OGN about queer disabled nerd going to FanCon and falling in love for the first time. I'm like, what's FanCon? Apparently that's what you call it when there's no comics involved. This is like for TV shows and stuff.
Okay.
Anyway, it's written by Jessica Walton, who is queer and disabled herself. So this is own voices. Oh, yeah. And artist Ashka. It's a one name kind of thing. It looks great. It looks very cute. It looks heartwarming in a way that I need in my life right now. But I have not read anything about it. So other than like the blip on the cover, right? So going in blind. So we'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
I mean, it sounds cute as hell.
Yeah.
So.
It sounds cute as hell.
Makes it look
I feel
very
like the
cute
bar, the bar for cute YA OGNs has gone so much higher for me since getting into Heartstopper. But I think it'll be enjoyable regardless.
Gotcha. This looks really fun. I mean, looking at the preview art on Google, and like chapter 1 opens with the sarcasm is strong with this one. So I imagine this is going to be very fun and cutesy just from that little bit alone.
Yeah.
So you found this just at your library, or was this something that
Yep.
you had your eyes on before that?
Nope, just
Gotcha.
at the library. I was browsing. I went after I finished the semester and grabbed a bunch of stuff, and this was one of the things I pulled off the shelf.
Just picturing you running through the library like that old Toys R Us, like run through the store, just shove stuff in the cart game that they had on Nickelodeon in the 90s.
Yeah,
This
God,
is...
I used to plan out what I would do if I ever won them. Like, first you hit the toy horse aisle, then you go to the Sega games.
Wildly different priorities, but I appreciate your passion.
Right. Well, let me talk about a book that is on the top of my pile this week. Danny, you're gonna be you picked the book that I'm gonna be reading this week, which is The New Gods #1. This is by Ram V, art by Jorge Fornes, inks by Evan Cagle, colors by Francesca Segala. Never have I ever been able to get into The New Gods, so I figured why not try this new book by the one person who may actually be able to get me interested, Ram V. Not a big Aquaman fan. I love Aquaman now after reading his Aquaman book, right? So I'm very excited to see what Ram V is going to be doing, especially with Jorge Fornes on art. I mean, this book looks slick as hell just from the preview. Boy, oh boy, I love Fornes' art. So like, you've got a banger of a creative duo right out the gate for me to get interested in this. The summary makes me think this is going to be a retelling of a story that hasn't hooked me in the past, though, but I want to like this. So let me just read the big long synopsis that DC has provided, which is: an old god has died and the reverberations of his passing are felt across the universe, setting forth the soldiers of an intergalactic army and awakening the latent powers of a mysterious child on Earth. but this has all been foreseen, prophesied by the source, and fed as enigmatic images to its agent Metron. Now as Metron brings word of this cosmos-shattering prediction to the residents of New Genesis and Apocalypse, both worlds are thrown into conflict and chaos. On Earth, Scott-Free and Barda find themselves unaware of this incoming chaos, while consumed with their most daunting task yet, parenthood. Rom V and Evan Cagle bring forth the fourth world to a whole new generation in this epic of cosmic proportions. An old god has died, the new gods are born. I mean, I loved Mr. Miracle. Like, if you read the Mr. Miracle book, it's great. So I'm glad to see that some of that is carrying forward. The build up to this, I didn't read this completely in advance. I should have read it more like a wacky 90s like movie trailer. Because just, an old god has died and the reverberations of his passing are felt across the universe. But anyway, so I'm excited for this.
Pauly Shore is Mr. Miracle.
Mr. Miracle. Oh, brother. Yeah, could be fun. I have to imagine that Rom V is going to knock this out of the park, but that's just me setting unexpectedly high bars for a creator who has done nothing but impress me. So I don't want to necessarily get too excited about this, but nonetheless, I want to try at least number one to see if I can finally get into the New Gods, because I've never really been able to connect with any of Jack Kirby's super cosmic creations. Eternals, Kieran Gillen made the change for me, and maybe for the New Gods, it's going to be Rom V. So fingers crossed that this will work out for me. I don't know if you guys looked at this at all, but you guys keep up with DC Comics like every week, right? That's what you're doing. Okay, Brian and Kate are shaking their heads. I can't see Kate's face, but I imagine she's shaking her head very hard right now.
No. I got priced out of keeping up with weekly Marvel or DC books years ago, honestly.
Yeah. And you're probably better for it,
Yeah. Well, I'll let you guys know how this is and whether or not you should trade Wait For It in the future to get it from your library. But let me kick things over to Brian. What is on the top of your pile this week?
Yeah, top of my pile is a book that I think you recommended, Mike. Leviathan Volume 1, written and illustrated by Shiro Kuroi. This is a pretty standard, what I call derelict sci-fi horror. Specifically thinking of in the vein of if you've seen Alien Romulus, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Where it's a haunted house in space, basically. And this seems to be very much in that vein. These people find a derelict ship drifting. They break in and discover the diary of a middle schooler who has been documenting the horrors that befell the crew. And possibly there is still crew on the ship, unknown. But definitely, I just finished reading the it came out last fall, Alien's Bishop book. It's a direct sequel to Alien 3, following what happened to Bishop after the mining colony, which is very good. If you're at all interested in the Alien novelizations, check it out.
I'll let Nick know that he should put this on his shelf so he can never read it because it's not a comic book. But yeah,
if Nick cares, he already knows.
That's true. Well, I'll be curious to hear your thoughts about this, Brian, because this does have dumb shonen horror shtick in it, but you may like that. I don't know. You may like it.
If nothing else, I've built up a tolerance to dumb shonen shit over the years.
Sure.
Just roll with it. Pretend I'm using the term shonen correctly if I'm misremembering here. But that's the silly boy anime stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So one of my friends at the start of the summer who has a little 10-year-old kid, they want to not have their brain melt over the summer, was trying to get her to read and was asking for recommendations and stuff. And I was like, well, what's she into? And all she wants to do is watch this weird cartoon called Naruto on streaming. And I'm like, you are in luck. There are some books for that. And he's like, oh, good. How many? A few. Enough to keep her busy. Yeah.
How big's your
Worked
bookshelf?
out great.
Yeah, that's great. Leviathan is not like Naruto. I just want to put that out there.
Okay.
It is much more more dire.
Simultaneously more and less interested somehow.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break. We haven't done this in a minute, but we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Kate about how she got into comics, as well as everything else that Kate does that isn't comics. So we'll be back in just a second. This week on I Read Comic Books, we are talking about the one and only Kate Skocelas. Kate, did you know that your first episode was episode 52 called Don't Say Cerebro Around Mike, way back in January of 2016, January 3rd, 2016? I mean, that's a long ass time ago.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
I know.
It's almost 9 years.
I know. It's we're edging close to it. The show has been on apparently for almost 9 years. So, yeah, I looked into it because I had to search through the histories of Google because a lot of our feed has been lost due to transfers and movements and stuff. I still have copies of all of those episodes, but like just to do a quick Google search, there is still a website that apparently hosts every single episode of IRCB that we don't own, but whatever, it's better for SEO, right? But yeah, the episode was me and Kate and Nick, and we talked about our comic book New Year's resolutions, which is always a fun thing to do because I never go back and listen to those episodes. So this time I did, and we mostly at the beginning talked about like what your New Year's resolution was at the time, Kate, which back in episode 52, you said you were finally going to read some classic comics such as Watchmen. You said because you wanted to read the before Watchmen stuff that I think was coming out around that time. You said you wanted to read V for Vendetta, Hellblazer, Sandman. So you don't have to go into extreme detail here, but did you ever end up reading those comic books?
Well, here's the thing. I am a neurotic, obsessive user of Goodreads, so I can tell you for sure not only which ones I read, but when I read them.
Oh, okay, perfect. Do you have it? Do you have it handy? Okay.
Yeah, so I did read Watchmen, Hellblazer, and Sandman, as long as we're talking about for Hellblazer and Sandman, just the like volume ones of those runs.
Okay.
But I never actually went and read V for Vendetta. I have seen the movie several times, but
Sure.
it's still on the list. It's still marked as want to read on my Goodreads someday.
I dig it. Well, that'll be an easy one to get from the library for sure. If you ever decide to sit down and take on that tone.
It's not an access issue. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can't get your hands on that super rare V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
It's the problem where it's A, long, and B, depressing. Like,
right.
and the more our politics devolves into nightmarish realms, the less I want to read it in my free time. So
Yeah. I can't blame you there.
I need like a book club or something to force me to read it.
Gotcha. So
preferably with like aftercare.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
What we're saying is that for all those Goodreads reading challengers for next year, if you really want to torment us, you could have Kate come on the episode and we could read that as part of the January Goodreads pick. If someone wants to force us to, don't do that, please. I'm begging you, please. But no, it's interesting. You've been on the show since 2016. It says January 2015 in the notes. That's because Mike made a typo that stuck around for 9 years. So you joined in 2016 on the show. I think shortly before that, you were writing some articles for us on the old Destroy the Cyborg website. I mean, it's been a really long time, but Kate, I'm curious, how did you first get into reading comics? And do you remember what brought you from reading comics to wanting to work on the Destroy the Cyborg site / be on the IRCB podcast?
I do. So I got into comics in 2012 due to poverty, where I was at a place where I couldn't. Yeah, woo! I couldn't afford internet or cable, so I was going to the library like twice a week to pick up. That's when I got back into reading because it is free. So I was reading a ton, and the Grand Rapids Downtown Public Library is what I was close to, and they have a whole room of DVDs and comics, or at least at that point, they had those in the same room. And I was going into there for the DVDs constantly because that's what one does when one doesn't have access to television otherwise.
Sure.
Watched a lot of documentaries that year from the library. But that's when I saw them and was like, why not? Picked up some and got into it. The very initial ones I picked up were things like the first Sandman comic by Neil Gaiman. I must have been like resolving to read further in that series or something, because I'm pretty sure that was one of the first I read, because I was into his novels at this point. This is before we knew that he sucked as a person.
Sure, yeah.
And
a running theme
I
if you
was
go back far enough in comics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I had read, as part of this year, several of his novels for the first time and picked that up.
Okay.
And that's how I got into it, and I really liked it. Got into it. I went back to college, and like that's where I ended up at. How I ended up at GVSU. Did the comic book club thing. I met Mike through. I met you through having you come via Zoom. Or whatever was the video chat thing at the time, on the big screen in front of the comic book club, to talk about your career in comics. At that point, you were at Comixology, and it was fun, and that's how we chatted. And I found out about your site and was like, yeah, I want to write stuff for that. That sounds fun. And met you guys, and the rest is history, I suppose. But I started recording in 2016, because I graduated that December, and then come January had free time, because that last semester is when I first got really sick with lupus and diagnosed. And then I had 2016 off, where I was on disability and trying to get that initial flare under control so that I could actually like have a life. And originally was thinking I was going to go back to like actually like do the job that I got my undergrad degree for. And then circumstances changed with the diagnosis, and ended up going back for computer science stuff instead to do a master's. So yeah, I had because I went back, started the computer science stuff summer of 2017. So I had like that first year and a half off, where it was like a thing to do and to interact with other people, when I was stuck living with family because I was really sick, and just doing that awful initial trial and error process where they try you on different meds to see what'll work and what you'll tolerate. And so you have a lot of like swings and misses, which was unpleasant. So comics and that stuff really got me through that period, which was nice. And what's funny is I have been a neurotic user of Goodreads since 2013. So I can look at
you have your whole history.
The exact 70. I have a shelf for every year of separated, a shelf for the books and a shelf for the graphic novels. And it's funny to look at what books I was picking up changed in terms, because I've always done a lot of library reading. It's cheaper, but I was really into Marvel that year, and that's also when I discovered Saga.
But
that 2015, I was reading so many different Marvel titles.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the books, I mean, I can see this from my own perspective of like how I pick like the books that I'm picking up and talking about on the show over the years, right? Compared to, I've been tracking all of my stuff in a Google spreadsheet since like 2018, 2019, because
freaking the sheets.
Goodreads is too, I know it. Yeah, so I've been doing that, and it's interesting to see what I've read. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like Goodreads is just too slow for me, but it's very like, I have to salute you for your dedication to your Goodreads use, because holy smokes, that's an incredible database of just like things to have. I don't know how many people actually really religiously keep track of their reading habits and what they've been reading over the years. So that's an incredible thing to have for yourself.
It is. I mean, I started on it before Amazon bought it and made it worse. And now I'm like, because I have so much data in there, I'm very locked in an uncomfortable way. I need to like, I don't know. But that was, looking back, I'm like, oh, I was so into Marvel at the time. Well, yeah, that it turns out is when like Miss Marvel first started coming out. That's when we were getting the Matt Fraction Hawkeye. That's when we were getting the Nathan Edmondson Black Widow run, the finely woven thread, like 3-volume masterpiece. So there was a lot of amazing Marvel stuff coming out that year.
Yeah. I think on the episode we ended up talking about like you had picked the Vision. Oh yeah, this is the thing I wanted to bring up about this episode that I thought was so fascinating. You had been talking about the Vision, like you had been reading the Tom King, Gabriel Walta
One
Vision
of the best
series that was
maxi
coming out at the
series
time.
of all time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I at the time I balked at it. I was like, oh, I don't know, Kate. That sounds like it sounded really goofy to me, so I didn't want to read it. And you were like, Mike, you have no idea how serious and intense this book is. And of course, now I've read that book like 3 or 4 times since then, right? Like since that series finished. But it's on that episode where you can hear me getting convinced by your argument that I should read this book. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll give that little book a try. I never heard of this Tom King guy. And here we are in 2024, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I I have to applaud, you digging into weird stuff that I wouldn't necessarily try and convincing me, that it's been a great thing of this show over the many, many years that we've been doing it with a lot of people. But it's so funny to hear it in the episode, hear my mind go from that sounds dumb to maybe I should try that. So I appreciate that. I thought that was such a funny moment in the episode because Nick and I are sitting on the episode talking about, I think Nick talked about the Fade Out. I talked about Bitch Planet. We had a big conversation about all those books because we all, I think, were reading in some capacity around that. Like you were getting interested into the Fade Out because I think Nick had recommended it a bunch, and I was talking about Bitch Planet, which like universally pretty loved. So yeah, but it's funny you can just hear my mind switch over from like, I guess I'll give that a try. It's very, very fun.
So the lesson there, guys, is that Mike is a man of weak convictions, and you can convince him of anything.
I never said I had any sort of convictions, Brian. So I talk a big talk, but I'm weak-willed. Okay, weak-willed. Anyway, so
I want to talk. I just showed you my Pokemon binder.
I know. Anyway, so interesting, so I think it's funny. As I was looking through the history of this, I did see the email, I think, where you said, Mike, I'm finally done with college. I can do more for the show / the site. And I'm like, cool. And then I immediately put you on the episode of like the next show. So it's really funny to just see how things played out. And here we are 9 years later, like we've been
here we are 9 years
all
later.
over the board.
My assigned editor to send my written reviews to was Paul, and here he is, proof listening this episode.
Exactly. The crew has barely changed over the years, which is great.
We've just gotten older and more tired.
Yeah. Older, more tired, and like very niche with what comics bullshit we'll put up with. Maybe I don't know. I like to think I'm a little bit open-minded, but at the same time, I don't stand for any bullshit.
We can definitely convince you to be open-minded.
This is true. Well, okay, we can move on from this. So, Kay, outside of comic books, I know you as, at this point, the Lego person in the group. If only because over the past couple of years, it has been, Kate, you will drop links into our group chat where you're just like, hey, there's a Lego sale right now. Do you guys want to get this Marvel thing? And it'll be like some Wolverine weird thing. How did you're into comics. How did you get into Legos, and what does your collection look like these days?
My shame pile is very large. It now spans several rooms in the basement. I got into this a couple years ago because basically, so like during 2020, 2021, everyone was stuck at home doing stuff. And so I had lots of like friends that were wanting to do things online together and stuff like that. In free time. But then come 2022, things like really opened up more for people who are otherwise healthy. But that's when my health stuff that's when I started the first chemo that I tried. And so I was like both really exhausted. So like didn't want to go out, and also like high risk for going out in these places where like there was no one else masking. And so I got into it as like a thing to do at home that wasn't a screen. And my like drug of choice is putting on an audiobook while building Lego. And
nice.
Podcasts work too. I got very into, with a Goodreads book club I'm in, doing this silly book challenge that made me go really hard on listening to 1 million audiobooks to get points for my team. It's one of those things where you like have to meet certain requirements, like a book with a red cover or this or that, except they're all geared towards different superheroes. So you complete 3 tasks for that superhero to recruit the superhero to your team. And so you get point for each book, and then if you get all 3, you get 3 extra points, right? So like it's a whole thing. There's a villain of the month, which works the same way, but is like you have to read them that month. So anyway, I got really into that as like a thing to be doing while essentially treading water, waiting for something to work. And
Gotcha.
and I was having a harder and harder time looking at screens and seeing screens because of the flare affected the nerves that control my pupils. So I was having a lot of light sensitivity. And your pupils are also essentially your camera aperture of your eye, right? So things were increasingly blurry and it's hard to describe what a TV screen looks like with that, but like it looked very like jerky. Like I couldn't follow the motion smoothly, and my brain it got bad enough my brain couldn't compensate anymore, because your brain overrides a lot of the weirdness of your like human vision, right? Like you don't see yourself blinking all the time. You see things as a smooth motion instead of jerky. And that like stopped working as the nerve stuff kind of fell apart. And so that's how I got really into it. And then I discovered the dopamine rush of buying new Lego, as one does.
Sure, yeah.
And so I have a ton of them. My main line that I'm really into right now is all the space sets that are made for adults. So like the space shuttles and stuff like that. I've been building a lot of those lately. I really like the seasonal sets. I have a million of those that I like put together for, Easter, Halloween, Christmas, and then take apart and put back in the closet. And yeah, I don't know. I just like, it's the most like zen, like soothing thing to me of like doing something with your hands that is like engaging enough, like complicated enough, like you have to be paying attention without being too like frustratingly hard. Like I never could get into like, I have friends that are super into painting minis, and I could never get into that because I like get too perfectionistic with it and like don't get the results I want, or have little mess ups and stuff like that. And like Lego's so perfect in that if you mess up, you just pop those bad boys off and redo it. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
So the most frustrating thing that happens to me is sometimes I'll like in the process of, taking apart a set to store for the next year or whatever, sometimes they like to launch themselves across the room and you like lose a little piece here or there. And then putting it together in the future becomes annoying because you're like, God damn it, where's that thing? But these days, it's not like when we were kids. These days, you can just go for like 10 cents on Lego.com and buy that missing piece, like that exact little thing. And they'll send it to you for cheap. It's amazing. So we're living in the golden age of Lego, you guys.
Amazing.
Yeah, I can't believe that never occurred to me that you could do that.
Yeah. You couldn't when we were kids. So I was a Lego kid, but not anywhere near to the extent that I'm into them now. As a kid, I was much more into the playing with them as essentially little doll houses. Like I had a castle set and stuff like that. So like the building was a means to an end versus the end in and of itself. But I send you guys the ones that I think you'll be into because they have lots of like Batman sets now and really cool, like the X-Men mansion just came out. Stuff like that they're so expensive though. The upcharging for the licensed comics properties is insane, like fully insane. They bring you such joy. So
yeah.
I don't know.
If only the dopamine rush was like correlated to the price of the purchase.
No kidding.
Like,
I'm getting $250 worth of dopamine today. Yeah.
Yeah, you've gotten some, Mike. Didn't you get the Batmobile?
I did get the Batmobile. Danny and I still have to finish building our Batmobiles at some point, because even in a 3-hour stream that we did, I think I got about a third of the way done, which is insane to me because it is Lego. But at the same time, it's a very complicated piece of adult machinery. Okay.
Exactly. This is model building, you guys.
Exactly. Well, that begs the question. Okay. So you've got a lot of Legos. Do you have a prize set that you like love that you maybe keep on display year round? Or is there something that like was particularly challenging for you to build that like you wanted to, show off to like, hey, I put the Challenger together and it's not going to explode in my house or something like that?
Right.
I don't know. So-
I do, and then I eventually run out of shelf space and take everything apart that's on display, and then the process starts over where I build things and put them on the shelf until the shelf fills.
Gotcha.
My favorite sets are the adult sets, so they're a little more complicated, mostly because it just like it takes me longer to build them, which is nice when you spent
Yeah.
a fortune.
Yeah.
I also tend to they partition them out in little bags now, which is nice for finding pieces, but also like really speeds up the process. So now I like do the thing where you dump a bunch of bags out to kind of slow yourself down.
Hard mode.
Yeah. Well, because I hate when you spend like $100 and it's like, well, that was a good 2 hours.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, but my favorite ones are the ones that have more of the technic elements, like so the gears and motors and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
just built the lighthouse, which was really cool. That kind of thing really gets me.
Gotcha. I will say that the best part of building that Batman, I just Googled the word lighthouse, no context, and I thought that the Lego would just come up. Sorry. No, the best part of building that Batman set is the amount of gears and the Technic stuff that comes with it, like to the point where like you can press a little button and it lights up and stuff. That's so cool to me. I really love that stuff. I totally
Very
agree.
Cool.
Do you have like a white whale, like a Lego set that you really want?
Oh my god, yes, of course. So there's all these older buildings that now cost insane amounts of money. Um some of the old trains cost a fortune because on the secondary Lego's big thing is planned obsolescence, right? Where they or planned scarcity, where everything's out for like a year or two and then they retire it and then it shoots through the moon on the secondary market because now you can only get it on the secondary market. But there's a fishing shop that is like the building that I want so badly that I just will never have because it costs a fortune. And same with the Emerald Night Train. It is like $1,000+ online these days. But I did get the Orient Express set though, which is also a gorgeous train.
So what you're saying is I really need to get on this Vincent Van Gogh Starry Night thing before it sells out. That's what you're telling me?
Yeah, so you can actually look up online when sets are retiring. And
okay.
So I don't know when that one is retiring, but you can look to see how soon it is. Marvel, I'm sorry, looking at the notes thing. The Lego has a section on their website even where you can go to like leaving soon or whatever.
Gotcha. That's how they get you.
Yeah, and I always want to like, so things will go really low at the end because they want to get rid of them before because they roll out the new stuff, right? And hitting that just right is so hard though, like because if you don't hit it just right, then you're stuck paying twice as much because it sells out in the final sale, and then you like, so that's the end of the year is always a little gambling on that for me because a lot of stuff retires at the end of the year. Gotcha.
Okay.
So I just had the term Lego scalper pop into my head, and a part of me died.
Oh, 1000%. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a whole thing. You can listen to many different podcasts on Lego investing where people do not have any interest in Lego itself. They don't build them. All they do is buy and store the boxes because right now it is one of the best investment, like return on investments you can do. But the market got saturated with people doing this, and now it's like much less of a guarantee than it used to be.
This is like Magic the Gathering finance stuff. Have you guys ever seen this where people like literally buy
ridiculous.
cards just so that they can resell? It's
fully off topic, but you hear about the PS5, like the deluxe edition that just came out? So many scalpers bought them, and there's so little demand that they're having to sell them at a loss.
Amazing.
So I can get a
that
PS5
sparks joy. That sparks joy.
Oh,
because remember when the first PS5 came out was like, that was 2019 or 2020. I can't remember.
I think it was 2020 because I think it was in the pandemic.
Because it was impossible to get one of those things for like a year and a half. But now we don't have, a global pandemic that's crippling the supply chain.
Issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But they still tried to treat it like the first PS5.
Well, I hate that idea that you have just introduced into my brain, Kate, about people who use Lego sets as an investing matter. So we have to move on. So outside of Lego, though, Kate, you do a lot of reading. You do a lot of reading comics as well as prose books. I guess, curious, do you have other hobbies that you're into? Things that you're, any TV shows, anything else that you're you spend your time on when you're not building Lego and reading comics and books?
Yeah, I mean, I got really into trail walking. Like I hesitate to call it hiking because we're in a flat part of Michigan. Like I walk on trails in the woods. It's not that rigorous, but I got really into that as part of lockdown, and that never really changed for me as things got better. And then TV stuff lately. I just watched the six episode Black Doves on Netflix. It is fantastic. Highly recommend. It's like takes place right before and on Christmas, with Keira Knightley as like a spy. It's very cool.
Okay.
But otherwise, no, I've just been doing the grad student grind. I was started in fall 2019, quickly turned into not the grad school experience I expected, but finished my classes online. And then 2021, because of all medical care being online, because they didn't want us to come into the hospital on all our immunosuppressants, stuff got missed, and I ended up getting into that bad flare that then I was off for a year and a half from life, because so much, like, it turns out when you can't see very well and like your vision's double and blurry, it really slows down what you do for basically anything. I spent a huge amount of time just listening to audiobooks with my eyes closed because it gave me such a headache having the double vision. So just chilling with my cat, listening to books. But finally finished all that stuff and am now back to grad student and getting to the end of the degree here. Just in time for Trump to win and want to cut funding to everywhere I'd be applying for jobs. Because I've been connecting with people at NOAA, JPL, and NIH, all of which he's like, no money for you, or I want to get rid of you completely. So
you mean you don't want to go work for RFK Jr. at the Department of Health?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Good work for me.
Yeah, like the really exciting thing in my life is I got on a JPL CERN joint project as a CS person working with a bunch of physicists this semester, and like that was just before the election results and stuff. It's like a whole thing. So
maybe for folks that are curious, I guess, like where's your specialization? You said you got into computer science and stuff. I guess where was your specialization while you were finishing up your degree? Here, I guess, in your postgrad.
Yeah. So I did just a standard master's in computer science, and then my PhD is a dual PhD in computer science and ecology, evolutionary biology, and behavior. And the lab I'm in studies artificial life and digital evolution stuff. So in terms of the applied, we kind of do one foot in each side, where on one hand, a lot of my research is using computer science to build model systems to study biology. And then, that's how, like, for the NOAA type jobs, where I'd go, is that it's essentially just getting really good at building computer models of stuff. And I happen to be doing it for research into the major transition to multicellularity, like how we went from unicellular to multicellular, how that process works. But it's generally applicable to a million things. But then on the other side, using the process of evolution to inspire computer science machine learning models in a field called evolutionary computation. So that's the stuff am working on right now for there's something called the Ascarian radio array down near the South Pole, which is a big radio telescope array looking for neutrinos, ultra high energy neutrinos from like supernovas and the growth of black holes and stuff like that. And we're trying to optimize for future installations because the one that's been down there for more than a decade has not found any yet. So the hope is to have the computer find better solutions and designs than humans were able to for version 2 of these installations, which has been fun. I do really like when it's very like green pasture, happy time when I switch into a new domain area. So there's a whole bunch of new stuff to learn about. So learning about all this neutrino astrophysics stuff has been really fun. And then eventually I get burnt out on it and I'm like, I never want to hear about this ever again and find a different subject area. But yeah, so like the dream would be to continue working with the JPL physicists I'm working with now as a postdoc through the NASA postdoc program. But Lord knows it's very uncertain if that'll even exist in 2 years, which is the timeline I'm on right now, because of the delay in my taking all that time off to do the various treatments for the lupus flare. So we'll see. It's not a great time for government-funded science, but
But when has it ever been, really?
Yeah.
Oh, there's definitely
not in our
boom and
lifetimes.
bust eras. Yeah. It is an amazing time to be in government-funded science if you are cool with helping kill people, like putting all the money into military research.
Right.
I very much will not do that. Like I have this weird thing where I want to be able to sleep at night, you know?
I've heard of that. They call it a conscience.
Yeah. That's crazy. I'm really sorry.
I did a bunch of job talks with different folks at different military labs, and the whole thing is like, when you are entry level, you have absolutely no say in the research you work on. So you can't say, I only want to do defensive stuff, which I'd be fine with. And I've actually done for the DoD before, but as like part of my funding for my PhD. But so you don't get to determine if you're going to make like a killer robot versus defense systems.
Family-friendly robot.
So. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you've understood, listeners out there, is that Kate has done like real serious hardcore fucking science. She also reads comic books with us. That is there is this thin line that connects us between like a massive major scientist and it is comic books. So anybody truly can be a part of this community of people.
Gonna ride Kate's credibility to the stars and beyond.
Listen, I didn't say I was gonna do that, but
blow your guys' mind to find out that there is a huge intersection between computer science research nerds and people who are into comic books, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic cards, and tabletop gaming. Like,
interesting.
Turns out
that tracks.
Almost everyone I work with is into this stuff. Like my PI has every Marvel floppy that's come out in the last like 20 years in his garage.
Jesus.
He just straight orders them all through one of those mail delivery services, and they just show up, and he then reads and sticks them in his car. Yeah, it's wild.
UPS hates this guy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, I not to make like a hard pivot off of this, but Kate, you did mention you have a wonderful little cat. As fellow pet owners on the show, I guess, could you tell us about your little cat and just how amazing she is?
My beautiful little baby. Yeah, so I adopted a cat for the first time. She's my first kitty in January 2020. Little did I know she was about to become a pandemic pet. So we got super tight because I was immune compromised, living alone in a global pandemic. So it was just her and I 99.9% of the time. Got real tight, got real neurotic, where when I finally lived with other people, again, moving in with family when I got too sick, they had to keep telling me that I was talking out loud to her because it was driving them nuts. Because I just didn't realize it anymore. I just constantly was just talking to her. But yeah, so when I got her from the shelter, they said she was a Siamese mix, and I was like, cool. And turns out she is a pretty uncommon purebred, called a snowshoe Siamese, which also means she's riddled with health problems, because whenever you get these less common breeds, it means they're horribly inbred. And that is why she has been had all these health issues. And then like they also said she was 5. Turns out she was more like 10 at the time. We found out not that long ago she was having an eye issue that didn't make sense for, like, at her what we thought was her age. We thought she was 9 at the time. It is a sign of like a neurologic condition. So she got sent to a
Okay.
veterinary ophthalmologist who looked at her and was like, no, your cat is just 5 years older or so than you thought. So she is, in fact, like 14 or 15, not 9. So she's
Okay.
my sweet little old lady. A lot of things clicked into place when we found that out, of like all her health issues that were just between the like purebredness and being like way older than we thought. It's all like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay.
You're like
So
English
yeah,
royalty.
yeah. Exactly. God damn it, Brian. um, yeah. So yeah, she's very sweet, but she's also she's just a pillow princess at this point, just chilling on the bed. She doesn't do a lot these days. But she's the perfect cuddle cat if you're sick of reading comics.
Well, that's great. I mean, I've seen pictures of this cat. She's very
Yeah.
adorable.
She is cute as a
And
button.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I just had to ask. We got to ask about
I'm
people's
getting
pets on the show.
Yeah, the next cat I get, I'm getting the most generic looking dumpster, just brown, gray, whatever, like boring looking cat that can't possibly be anything special. Like,
I
give
got one of
me
those at
your
home if
most
you want to take her off my hands, because she's a
perfect.
real shit.
Yeah. The most mixed breed, just American short hair. They are way healthier than any purebred cat on average. And that is all I want at this point after dealing with so many health issues with Una for so long. It's so hard to watch them go through it. It's also devastatingly expensive.
Yeah,
My
I
first
gotcha.
and last purebred cat. My accidental
Yeah.
purebred cat.
Accidental purebred cat, right? Yeah. Well, I guess to wrap up the episode, because I just looked at the time here, I guess we've got one last question that I ask on every single one of these, which is, you've known Brian and I for quite a bit, for quite a while. So I'm curious, based off of all of the comic books that you've read over the years, maybe something you've just seen, do you have a comic book that you would recommend to each of us?
I do. So I, in the interest of trying to pick things that you haven't already read, because you guys
Okay.
both read a ton, I picked middle grade books for each of you, and it ended up being OGN memoirs for each of you. So for
Okay.
you, Mike, I think you'd really like Mexikid, a graphic memoir by Pedro Martin. It's about, he's a Mexican American, and it's written about when he was a little boy. I think he's like 8 or 9 at the time of the comic. And his family um goes on a road trip in their like RV with like 8 or 9 siblings down to Mexico to get his grandpa and bring him back from Mexico to live with them in California. And
Okay.
it is like laugh out loud hilarious in so many points. It is very poignant, like you'll tear up. The art is unbelievable. He's one of these people that is both an incredible writer and a fantastic artist, and you just like, how is this possible? But I think you'd really like it. It has also
Okay.
won a bunch of awards. And Brian, if you haven't already, I think you'd really like the When Stars Are Scattered, which is by Omar Mohammed and art by Victoria Jameson. She, if you recognize the name, she did like Roller Girl and some of those other award-winning middle grade books. But this is about when Omar was growing up in a refugee camp. He is Somali and was displaced by the civil war there. So he's 11 at the start of the book and has a 9-year-old intellectually disabled brother. His dad was killed as part of the war, and they were separated from their mom, and they don't know if she's alive or not. So he's essentially living in this refugee camp as a little kid, trying to take care of his brother and not starve to death, right? Like the very fundamentals of like surviving day to day, because they're not getting their needs met. And he's given the opportunity to return to school and like kind of carve out a future for himself and his brother. But that's really hard given he, like, that means leaving his brother during the day in a very unsafe environment. And it's how he kind of sorts this out, how he makes it from there to who he is and where he is as an adult today. And it is so well done. Another one that won a bunch of awards. It will break your heart though. You need like a palate cleanser read afterwards. But I saw on Goodreads that Kate, your wife, read it, so maybe you already have seen this.
I thought the cover looked familiar, but I have not read it. So
Cool. Well, these look very interesting. I think Brian's is going to be more devastating than mine. So, but Brian,
it's not a competition, Mike.
Yeah. Well,
I just know Brian likes to cry more than you do. That's fine.
I guess. Well, Kate, thank you so much for these. This is great. I'm going to place a hold for this book, Mexikid, in my library as soon as we get up the recording here. But I think that wraps us up for today. I can't believe that your first episode was all the way back in 2016. That's insane. It's almost been 9 years since you were first on the show, which is bonkers. But it has been a very fun ride. If you guys get a chance, I'm going to put a link to this episode in the episode description. The link to episode 52, where you can go listen to it. It's very funny to hear IRCB back in 2016. So if you get a chance, take a listen, because it's goofy. The show is very much the same and slightly different at the same time. And you can hear all of the licensed music that Zander put in the show, because at the time we were like, who cares? So sue us. Yeah. We'll shut the show down. We don't even care. Now I very much care, and I don't want anybody to shut the show down. But anyways, this is a great episode. This is really fun to talk comics with everybody, especially to talk to you, Kate. So I think to wrap us up, I want to say thank you to Paul for proof listening today. Thank you to everyone listening live on Discord. Next week's show, who knows what it's even going to be. Next week is it's going to be me and Nick and Zach talking about comic books. Who'd have thought? Going to be talking about comic books. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I want to say thank you again to everyone listening. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.